Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a really fun, beginner-friendly journey into how visual cues act as dynamic instructions to the brain. We so often think of shapes, colors, and patterns as just, well, nice decorations. But the truth, they're actually incredibly powerful tools that pre-sort reality for us. So let's just dive right into this.
Our goal today is to uncover the why and the how of visual cognition. By the end of this explainer, you're going to understand exactly how visual structure pre-sorts reality. We'll identify the hidden roles of shape, color, and pattern, and we'll trace the mental journey from that very first glance to final judgment. Ultimately, we want to help you create spaces and designs that build instantly searchable memory, with absolutely no rote memorization required.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We'll start off with the visual core vocabulary, trace the journey from perception to meaning, and tackle the structure balancing act. After that, we'll hit some common mistakes students make and wrap it all up with a summary and a few practice questions. Let's get started. Now, what's genuinely fascinating is how we can translate three super basic visual words into actual cognitive functions. Shape isn't just, a circle or a square. It literally defines boundaries and tells our brain what category an object belongs to. Color assigns relative importance, and pattern, it sets our expectation and rhythm. When all three of these agree, your message feels totally coherent.
To put it in simpler terms, these aren't just clever little tricks for making things look pretty. They're three distinct ways of managing our limited attention before language even has a chance to catch up. Shape helps the mind find boundaries. Think of color literally like a notebook highlighter. You wouldn't highlight the entire page, right? You use it to separate the essential stuff from the supporting material. And pattern? Well, the human brain is basically a prediction engine. Pattern uses repetition to tell the brain what usually happens, which makes prediction visible.
Let's bring this into the real world, because it brilliantly illustrates how this exact same visual language helps literally everyone. A parent might use soft, round shapes to signal a safe, comfortable play area. A teacher might use repeating visual patterns on a schedule board to build trust and predictability. And a designer? They might use warm color highlights in an app to guide your eye to the most important tasks. Just a quick side note. While our source material doesn't prescribe specific age milestones for these activities, the cognitive principles are absolutely universal. So let's do a super quick recap. Shape equals boundaries. Color equals weight. Pattern equals prediction. Remember, these aren't three separate tricks. They are three forces managing the exact same thing, our limited attention.
If you only remember one thing from today's explainer, I really want it to be this anchor phrase. Keep it in your mind for literally everything you design or organize. Shape finds boundaries. Color assigns weight. Pattern creates expectation.
All right, let's shift gears a bit to the cognitive process and see how this all builds. A visual does not stop at perception. The eye sees, sure, but the mind concludes. It moves through the mind in four distinct stages. First, it gets noticed. Second, it's grouped into categories. Third, it's interpreted. And finally, it's judged. And because this progression happens in stages, you can actually influence each stage separately. How cool is that? Here is a huge takeaway. Perception is not neutral. Your mind doesn't just receive the world passively like a camera. It compresses it. Think of it like sorting your mail. You don't read every single envelope cover to cover, right? You scan for shortcuts, a logo, a stamp, a bright color. Visuals work the exact same way. And meaning? Meaning almost always comes from difference or contrast. Just like listening for your own name in a really crowded, noisy room, your brain is constantly comparing patterns. Meaning pops up the second something breaks that background expectation. Whether you're a parent tossing a brightly colored permission slip onto a pale, empty counter so it instantly stands out, a teacher interrupting a boring, repeating desk pattern to create a clear focal point, or a designer building a massive logistics dashboard in China that uses red strictly for urgent shipping exceptions. What you're doing is using perceptual interruption. You are making the decision space clearer.
To wrap up this section quickly, visuals move in stages. They are noticed, grouped, interpreted, and judged. And a visual has to differ clearly from its surroundings to carry any real meaning. If something isn't getting noticed, it might not be that the element itself is too weak. It might just be that nothing around it is giving it a role.
Now we hit what I like to call the Goldilocks tension, the structure balancing act. On one extreme, you have too much structure. This is actually a failure mode that stops thinking entirely. Overcoding makes things memorable, sure, but it's shallow. It leaves absolutely no room for the viewer to infer anything. On the flip side, Too little structure is hugely expensive for the brain. It forces the mind to build everything from scratch, which turns recall into pure, exhausting effort and creates noise instead of a usable memory.
What we really want is that sweet spot to trigger an aha moment, right? That's called insight. Insight happens right in the gap between what is shown and what must be inferred. It needs contrast to tell the eye exactly where to look and structure to tell the mind how the pieces fit together. Think about it. Memory, or recall, isn't a storage problem, it's an access problem. We want to use stable visual cues to create retrievable organization. To do this, we establish a hierarchy of attention. You have primary cues to tell you where to start, secondary cues to organize the main parts, and tertiary cues for the supporting details so they don't compete for your attention.
Let's look at how this balancing act plays out. A parent at home might deliberately avoid overstructuring every single toy bin, leaving just enough ambiguity for their kid to infer and play. A teacher might establish a super clear hierarchy of attention on the whiteboard, really large primary headers, much smaller tertiary details. Or a designer working on a complex interface. They'll purposefully use gentler visual cues, so a harsh, bright emphasis doesn't distort the user's interpretation or cause false alarms. You absolutely have to align the visual cue with the specific task.
Bottom line here, balance your structure to trigger insight. Use a hierarchy of attention to make memory fully searchable. The real expert move is choosing the smallest, gentlest cue that produces the exactly right thinking.
Okay, let's talk about where things usually go off the rails. A super common trap is making every single element equally emphasized. But guess what? When everything is loud, nothing stands out. You have to create a hierarchy. Another mistake? Constantly changing your color meanings. It completely drains mental energy to keep relearning the code. Relying on novelty alone is another one. It just creates noise without retention. Also, watch out for mismatches. Using a playful shape for a severe warning, it completely shatters trust. Overstructuring stops thought entirely. And finally, using extremely bright, urgent cues for nuanced, complex content can make a sophisticated argument feel totally alarmist. Always, always match the cue to the task.
All right, bringing it all together now. Visuals are cognitive tools that literally pre-sort reality for us. Shape finds boundaries, color assigns weight, and pattern shapes prediction. Remember that meaning absolutely requires contrast, and insight desperately needs a balance of structure and openness. Ultimately, the expert skill we want you to walk away with is judgment. Think of a visual as its own little cognitive environment. It tells your brain exactly what to connect, what to ignore, and what to actually remember.
Time for a quick knowledge check. Let's test your baseline understanding with a few practice questions. See if you can answer these by focusing on the how and why. You should definitely know by now that shape finds boundaries, color acts just like a highlighter, and meaning absolutely relies on contrast.
Stepping it up a notch, let's apply those basics to some medium-level scenarios across the home, the classroom, and the design studio. Think about how you'd use contrast for urgent tasks, or maybe gentler cues to make a lesson feel calm. And hey, if every section of your notes looks equally important, remember our lesson on building a hierarchy of attention to guide the eye properly.
And finally, some real brain teasers. Ponder these deeper conceptual questions to truly think like an expert in visual cognition. Think about that Goldilocks tension between too much and too little structure. Think about why recall is an access problem and how visual cues act like little handles so the brain can easily grab a memory later. This right here is where you shift from casual observer to true expert.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ask yourself the very next time you look at any layout, dashboard, or lesson plan. What story is this visual system asking me to believe? Is it helping my judgment, or is it trying to replace it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Start noticing the thinking inside the visuals all around you. I promise, it truly changes everything.